What is evil? In some series and stories of superheroes, it's easy to know who the heroes and villains are. Superman and Batman are the good ones. Meanwhile, Lex Luthor and the Joker are the bad ones. But in other plots, things aren't that simple. The story is more complex, and there isn't magnetism. Heroes can become villains, and villains can become heroes. In philosophy, initially things were like comics, easy to differentiate. Plato used the sun as a symbol of intelligibility and good, and shadows as a symbol of confusion. But things also got interesting, and now the idea of evil is not so clear. Evil as ignorance. Socrates believed that no one does evil by knowing about it. That is, that all evil came from ignorance. According to him, when people act badly, it's because they do it not knowing or understanding what good is. They confuse evil with good. In addition, Socrates said that such people don't understand that their behavior ultimately hurts themselves. Is that right? At least in the literature and series, it's not the case. Many characters seem to be aware of the evil they do and even enjoy it. Moreover, ignorance is not even necessary for evil. Many criminals are so evil because of the knowledge they have about how to do harm, and others seem to enjoy crime because they know that what they do is wrong. Their conduct would not be explainable from the Socratic perspective. Neither being ignorant necessarily makes you bad. Recent studies suggest that pre-linguistic children tend to show behavior that we would commonly call moral. Evil as rebellion. There are those who acknowledge that their actions are morally wrong, but they continue to commit them. Why do they do it? The philosopher Augustine of Hippo thought that sometimes people know what is morally bad, but they want to do it anyway, precisely because it is morally bad. Aristotle argued that although one understands what is good or bad, immoral behavior is still possible by what he called acratic. Acratic behavior happens by impetus acts, when an impulse cannot be governed and it avoids reflection. Even sometimes, the impulse can be of such power that even though one thinks about it, it cannot be overcome. Those who are evil for not being able to overcome impulses of a certain nature have been known as weak moral. The acratics are unable to follow their own moral code simply because their desires are greater than their will. Paris running away with Helena on the Iliad is a good example of this. In Arba mythology, many villains are moral weak, uncontrollable in their thirst for power, revenge, or pleasure, contrary to heroes who are epitomes of moderation and self-control. Evil as a counterculture. There are criminals and villains that cannot be interpreted under the Socratic or Augustine magnifying glass. There are those who are simply labeled as bad for challenging the moral vision of the society in which they live. For Nietzsche, the ideals of equity, immolation, nonviolence, and compassion infected Western culture from the birth of Platonic philosophy. In his perspective, the Superman is the one who resists such a reversal of values, so in many societies and series, he could be considered a villain. Nietzsche wanted to regain the original sense of the good. In ancient times, good was a word that designated the strong and their abilities. In this sense, goodness gave rise to acts that perhaps today would be classified as evil. Achilles, for example, was a mythological hero who would, under contemporary standards, is vindictive, brutal, and untimely. But for the thought before Plato and Christianity, he was a hero because he had such power that empowered him to define goodness and evil in his own terms. The 300 Greek soldiers who arrested the Persian army, or some heroes of Norse mythology, have the same characteristics as Achilles. In most series, characters with a non-ordinary morality are considered villains, but it might well be that they represented another stage in human morals history, or that in other societies, they were simply heroic. Evil as superiority. The previous kind of evil leads us to a more sophisticated one. If a technologically advanced alien race were to invade us and exploit our resources and have other moral codes completely different from ours, would we be justified in calling them evil? Today, we humans commonly justify the exploitation of other living beings by appealing to our superiority. Why should a higher being have a different opinion about us? Perhaps because of these issues, the creators of the most conventional comics and series are forced to make their most powerful heroes have human identity as well. It happened since Greek mythology. Heroes have a human part that gods don't have, and superheroes have a dual identity to ensure that their understanding of human weakness prevents them from taking control and subjugating us.
The bad is the stiff.
There are bad people who are indifferent to human pain. It's not that they want to cause it, they don't seem to care. Psychologist Carol Gilligan noted that the kind of moral deliberations girls make are generally different from the kind of moral deliberations boys make. Men tend to follow moral principles more rigidly, and girls tend to weigh the context where actions occur before judging them as good or bad. In fiction, the decisions of several characters are morally correct because they adhere to certain principles, but when a character follows the same principles without sensitivity to context, the same decisions can be regarded as reprehensible. It happens when an end is pursued without considering the means. On the other hand, many characters are heroic precisely because they break the law. They know that what happens around them can be more important than principles, than any moral regime. Who do you identify with? Do you think we all have a little of all these kinds of evil? If you liked the video, share it. And if you like the subject, please read Peter S. Fazell. Below, we leave you some links.